guys, and welcome to this week's episode of Tackle Our TBR. I believe this is episode 5, I want to say, or 6. It might be 6. Oh my gosh, this crazy little piece of hair. Anyways, if you don't know me, my name is Chloe. This is a series where I talk about trying to tackle my endless, crazy TBR that starts out at 56 physical books and kind of examining my relationship with reading and why I have such a hard time doing something that I do genuinely love. I've been reading avidly since I was a little kid, but at the age of 16, from like 16 to 18, I did not read a single book. I'm 21 now for reference, so we've been reading again for about 3 years. But that is a really long time, and I was thinking about that today and about like how I went from reading like 20 plus books a year to not reading a single book for 2 whole years. Like, that's insane. And there's so many things that go into it, and there's so many reasons that I got back into reading. Obviously, I've always enjoyed reading, so that was a huge part of why I wanted to get back into reading. But as well as reading a book being something that I enjoy and it being a hobby, to me, reading is a life skill. Engaging with media in general is a life skill. You have to be able to do it. You have to be able to strengthen that empathy in you. Like, it's like a muscle. Like, you have to work it out. You have to strengthen it. Your empathy, your critical thinking, your literacy skills. Being able to engage critically with a work is so important when it comes to looking at the world around us and engaging critically with the world around us, with our identity, with the identity of others, with social issues happening in our day and age. And in a day and age such as the one that we live in, I think it's especially important, and I think that everybody should read. Even if you don't necessarily enjoy it, I don't think that you have to enjoy the act of reading a book to understand that reading is such an important skill. I see it kind of like going to the doctor and going to the gym and eating healthy. Like, you have to do it. In my like you don't have to do it to survive, but you should do it if you want the highest quality of life and to be the best version of yourself. I think it makes you a better citizen in society. I think it will make you the best version of yourself for so many different reasons and in so many different ways. And we're going to kind of dive more into that today. I'm going to talk about the importance of reading diversely, not just like different genres, but reading about people that don't look like you or don't love like you and don't live like you. Because, I mean, this discourse is always going to be there on the internet. Unfortunately, there's a large subcategory of people in this community and in a lot of communities that truly do not see media as political and don't understand why reading is political, why watching movies is political, why fashion is political. But them not believing that it's political does not mean that it's not political. So, when I was 16, I read this one book and it sent me into what originally started as a reading slump and then was kind of like burnout, and I didn't read for 2 years, which is so bonkers to me because I was in school for those 2 years and I genuinely don't know what I did with my time if I wasn't reading. But the book that I read was, I think it was Who I Used to Be. I'll put the cover right here. This is the book, first and foremost, I want to preface by saying this is not a book that I would recommend to anybody, not because it's bad. I think it's a masterpiece, and I think that it was written beautifully with true victims of terrible things in mind. And I really appreciated the author for showing us some less common symptoms and side effects of abuse and assault survivors, as well as like just showing us the small things that change every day that go unnoticed for those survivors. It was a masterpiece of a novel, and it genuinely changed the way that I think about trauma response. But it was also such a debilitating, heartbreaking read that I could not, in good conscience, ever recommend this book to somebody. This is a book that you have to pick up and decide if you can read it or not. And at 16, it was a lot to take in. And when I was like the age that I read this book at like 15, 16, I was primarily a literary fiction and a romance reader. Those were really the only genres that I read. Um, so I just wasn't really, even though I had been a really big fantasy reader as a kid, that kind of faded over time. And I was not reading a lot of dystopian or fantasy or mystery or horror or any of those other genres. I was only reading these two genres. And I think that's part of what led to my slump, which turned into burnout and turned into me not reading for 2 years because I thought of myself as a lit fic or romance reader, And I did not pick that book up knowing what it was about. I had no idea what it was about. And I'm not somebody, this is my own fault because I'm not somebody that reads synopses, because the synopsis of a book always has the power to make me put it down. Like, if I pick up a book, like for example, if I pick up Legendborn and I read the back of the book, it doesn't make me want to read the book. And I don't know how to explain that. I decided I want to read a book by opening it and starting to read it. And I started um The Girl I Used to Be, and I don't know what I expected because that title and the cover, like, it doesn't give romance or happy book, and it was pretty clear. It was clear immediately that that's not what it was. But I kept reading, and like I said, I did really enjoy it. And as much as you can enjoy a story like that, I appreciated the ending. I appreciated the care the author put into the story, and I appreciated the different perspective on trauma responses that it gave me. But it was just, I couldn't pick up another book for ages. And this is not the first time, and it will not be the last time that that has happened in my life, where a particular book was just so heavy that I took a break from all reading for a while. But I think what would have helped me a lot is reading something different. Because now that I'm 21 and I've been reading again for 3 years and reading avidly, I have noticed that it's usually a literary fiction book that puts me into my slump. The most recent ones were Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin and Normal People by Sally Rooney, two amazing lit fic books that absolutely tore my heart out and I could not read. And what's helped me both times is jumping straight into a completely different genre. So going from lit fic to like cozy fantasy or speculative fiction or something like that, just where I'm existing in a different world with different customs and just a different experience so that I can forget. I don't know, I don't want to say forget because I'm always thinking about these books, especially when they have that much of an impact on me, but so that I can move on, I guess I should say. It's almost like you're grieving the story, you're grieving the person you met in the story, and not being able to change what happened, because even though these are fake people, the events always feel very real when you're that into a book, especially when it's a literary fiction novel and you know that somewhere out there there is somebody that is living this life where this is their reality. And I'm very lucky to be able to put the book down and move on to the next. And it's an essential skill we have in life. I mean, we have to be able to pick ourselves up, we have to be able to move on, we have to be able to keep going. And I think one of the things that's helped me the most with that is reading a diverse cast of genres, because I'm able to separate myself from the pain that I felt for the characters in that book and for the story. Another benefit to reading a bunch of different genres is obviously the way that a main character in a romance novel versus the main character in a dystopian novel interact with the world and with the people around them. It's very, very different. Like, it's just not in the same universe, literally and figuratively. Because romance novels typically focus on, I mean, there's really no typical, they can explore so many facets of the human experience. One of the ones I see the most and that I appreciate the most is the way that people will explore grief in romance novels, as well as confidence and self worth and self exploration. Whereas in dystopian novels, yes, we get some of that, of course. Like, there's always going to be that theme when you have human beings. But dystopian novels tend to focus more on the power of one person to change the world and bringing people together and confronting the darkest parts of our world. I think there's valuable things to take away from every perspective that we read from in every genre, every minority, whether how it's how you live, it's how you love, it's how you look. There's something important to take away from all these perspectives, because you, without media, without books, we would only be able to see the world from our point of view. And I cannot pretend like I would know what a gay man would do in my position or would do in this position, or what a black woman would do in this position. And the closest I can get is talking to real people and reading books, because it strengthens that empathy. It tries to force you to put yourself in people's shoes. And so, going into this series, going into this year, I was kind of looking at my TBR, because we did the thing where I posted a video, I took everything out, I counted the number of books in each genre, I showed you all the books in each genre, we did a whole tour. And common thing I noticed was my top genres from back then were the ones with the smallest TBRs now because I typically read them the fastest, which is literary fiction and romance. And my biggest stack was by far sci-fi slash fantasy, which I grouped together. And this year, I made it 6 months into the year, and I'd read like 3 books, I think it was, which is just crazy. That's not been a thing for me for the last couple of years. And I was trying to figure out why, and we've talked about screen time, we've talked about phone use, which is definitely a huge part of it, and I am working on. But I think another part of it is I have fallen into that hole of reading the same genre over and over and back to back to back to back, so that it becomes hard for me to pick up the next one because I'm not able to detach myself from the last story yet. So, I'm trying to mix everything together and read more of my sci-fi and fantasy first and just kind of switch between, like, we just read Queenie, we read One Day, which are both literary fiction. Then I read The Hunger Games. I am about halfway through Legendborn. I tried to read it all in one day, but that just was not happening because of school and stuff like that. And I forgot just how much I love fantasy books, especially speculative fantasy novels where it takes place in a contemporary setting. This is hands down, without a doubt, like the best fantasy book I have read in a while. And it was a fantasy book that got me back into into reading 3 years ago. My sister had me read The Cruel Prince because she loved it. And I mean, I devoured that series. I devoured that book and I got really into fantasy and then I stopped reading for a little bit again. And I kind of was in about where I'm at this year, where I wasn't reading very much or very often because I was trying to only read fantasy. Now we've made it to the reading update portion. So I think the last time we talked, I read The Hunger Games in one sitting. Now we're going to yap about what I'm reading currently because we're reading a couple different books. I did not finish a book this past week. I'm very upset about it. I know. That was the whole point. Like, we're trying to read a book a week pretty much right now. I did get about halfway through If Upon a Winter's Night, A Traveler by Italo Calvino, and I DNF'd it. I don't DNF books very easily, and it's usually for like the same reasons. And the way that women were characterized in this novel was just not something that I could get behind. I was reading it for school, and every time a new female character was introduced, I was just like kind of flabbergasted at how they were being characterized, and it was a constant throughout the book, and I just couldn't do it. So I ended up DNFing that, but I'd spent so much time reading it, even though I was only halfway through, because it was so dense. And when you're reading something dense, that also just so makes it so hard to get through because of how they characterize women. It felt so long. It felt so long. I On a happier note, I am 300 pages into the first Legendborn book. I want to finish this series this month, and that's what we're really working towards. So I'll definitely finish this before we talk again. I've also started Catching Fire, so the second Hunger Games book. I think I'm 3 chapters in, and I'm trying to finish that before the movies come back to theaters in September because I'm gonna go see them with one of my friend's friends, and I cannot wait. Um, Additionally, we are also reading Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. I started this book for fun and then realized I could also apply it to something I'm doing for school, a research paper I need to write. So I'm about, I want to say 18% of the way through. I can't remember what page, but I remember the percentage. And I'm loving it. I love the way that Zora Neale Hurston writes. This is not my introduction to her writing because I've read some of her short stories and stuff like that for school, but this is my first time reading it in novel form, and I'm just loving it so much right now. Despite my uptick in reading, I don't think my screen time is going down. Like, I've been looking at the trends over the last couple of weeks, and the only screen time, like I've said in the past, the only screen time I'm really looking at is TikTok. Um, because I feel like that's where most of my attention that should be spent on writing or reading or schoolwork goes. And I don't see a downwards trend yet, which so I'm very happy that I'm reading more, but I'm not really accomplishing one of the things that I set out to do, which was to lower my TikTok screen time because it just sucks the will for life out of me. Um so we're going to be brainstorming for the next couple of weeks trying to figure out like how else to get it down because I have plenty of activity books and coloring books. It's just tearing myself away from so that I can do those things. But In other news, I submitted one of my short stories to one of Readsy's weekly contests. If you don't know what Readsy is, it's a really cool website that has a bunch of stuff for readers and writers on it. And I am editing the first draft of my novel and I'm revising the outline. But while I'm doing that, I like to continue writing and playing around with my voice and my experience. So I decided to write a little short story and submit it to their weekly contest. You can read it on their website and I will link it down below. And I'll keep you guys updated if I continue submitting and reading and writing for these contests because I think it was a lot of fun. I've never written a short story before, so it was definitely a challenge, but I love getting to strengthen my writing and try different things, and having smaller projects that are not novels really takes it really forces me to focus in on my craft because there's not as much room for error. When you're drafting a novel, you have 70,000 words and you know that you're going to have to go back and edit it countless times. So it's like when you're doing the first draft, it's like, eh. For some reason, I didn't have that feeling when I was writing a short story. It was like, well, no, like this is only about 3,000 words. Like, focus on your word choice, focus on your sentence structure, focus on your paragraph organization. And I was really happy with my piece, considering it was the first short story I've ever written. I think that's all I have for you guys this week. Hopefully, next week I'll be able to come back to you with two books done. We're gonna finish Legendborn and Catching Fire. I'm saying that out loud now so I can hold myself accountable because school is also almost over for me. I have two research papers to write and then I'm done for like 2 weeks and then I go back to school again. But thank you so much for watching this episode of Tackling Our TBR, and I will see you guys next week.